Hey, this is Josh, Dream Body Clinic. So today we're going to talk again about why we believe cultured stem cells are better than non-cultured stem cells. I made a video on this before. There were a few little things that I got wrong and I want to fix that so everyone can see it here. But I still do believe, and our biologists believe, and our doctors, that cultured stem cells are better than non-cultured stem cells. Now look, at the end of the day, an MSC is an MSC is an MSC. They all work the same way. So when I say better, I don't mean like these are superior in any way. I'm not trying to compare it that way. What I mean is that these cells, you need to have the highest number possible. It is a numbers game at the end of the day. So in the United States, you're not able to get to those numbers. Doctors there are limited. They can only work with these labs that use a whole umbilical cord and placenta. They separate the stem cells from it, and then they freeze it and send it off. But they're not able to fully isolate those stem cells. So you still have a lot of monocytes. In fact, up to 2/3 of what they're claiming to be pure stem cells are usually monocytes and other cells. But it's still better than anything else out there. So that's the best thing for the United States, at least. Here in Mexico and other parts of the world, we're able to go a step further. We can take those stem cells and we can go all the way to pure isolation. And we do that by going into the lab. We use what are called flasks. We fill them up with a xeno-free medium here at our clinic. Some clinics use other mediums. That's what we use. And that's for human-based treatments. And those are the nutrients. That's all of the minerals, vitamins, everything those cells need to thrive and survive. We put them in what's called an incubator. It's almost like an oven. It's like baking almost, right? You're putting it in there. You've got the perfect CO2 levels, perfect oxygen levels, perfect temperature, everything they need to survive and thrive and start replicating. So that's the only way to get to the kind of numbers that you need to make a big difference. We've been doing this for about 8 years now, and we have dialed in our doses, and we have found typically with like an IV treatment, you want to get somewhere around 1.4 million per pound of body weight for ideal results. For knees, 50 million, most joints 50 million, some only 25, but it's all on our website if you're curious about that. That's a whole different video. So back to cultured stem cells. One of the big arguments I'm hearing from doctors and people in the United States is, oh, well, the original cell is the best. It's not. Again, an MSC is an MSC. They all work the same way. The difference is when we culture them, you'll see in biology, things tend to actually devolve, not evolve. So if you go to what's called the 12th passage, so we have these flasks, we're filling them up with fluid, and every time we hit a certain point, we do what's called a passage. And with that passage, we're at the next round. During that whole time, the cells are doubling, so you're getting more and more cells, and you can keep going. Now, we've found that if we go up to the 12th passage, which we've never done for treatments or anything, but that's where you really run into problems. The cells get worse and worse, and at the 12th round and on, you will see they start getting, instead of being a nice circular shape, they start getting oblong. Some of them are larger than they should be. You start seeing these degenerative type changes. So you wouldn't want to use those cells, but the argument will be that anytime you culture stem cells, you're going to end up with worse cells. Now the function doesn't change. What does change, and you can look this up, there's lots of studies on it, the telomere length does shorten. Now the telomere length is part of the chromosome. It's like the tail of the cell. For any cell has telomeres. And think of it like a 3D DNA helix that is circling up, and you've got the rungs to the ladder. Every time a cell replicates, you're going to lose a rung. So by having fewer rungs, technically the cell cannot live as long. Now that's a problem for us as human beings. All of our cells are doing that. You have what's called the Hayflick limit. If it's like 50 to 60 replications, that's it. That's why mathematically we could only make it to about 125 unless we find a way to extend telomere length. So these cells we're using are not from our own body. They're from a donor. And because of that, we're able to, well, not because of it, but we are able to use those because they lack what's called human leukocyte antigen, HLA. And I bring this up because HLA markers, if you're not representing those, the immune system isn't going to see it. They're called immune privileged, the mesenchymal stem cells. This is why we're able to take them from someone else and it's still safe. We're not having to do blood matching, anything like that. So by having these cells that you can do that, it's great, but eventually the stem cells are going to get in your system, they're going to go through, and after about 8 months to a year, they will differentiate. Before that, they won't differentiate. That's the interesting thing about mesenchymal stem cells, is that in vitro, like in the petri dish or in the lab, however you're going to work with them, you can manipulate them to turn them into osteocytes, osteoblasts, chondrocytes, all these different cells. But the problem is those cells that you turn them into would only be applicable to that person that donated them. So if we did a liposuction on me, took out some fat, we'd use it because it's a capillary rich source, lots of stem cells. Stem cells are pericytes, live on the capillaries, look like little octopuses, wrapped around, come off, release. That's why we want capillary rich tissue like placenta, umbilical cord, but you could also do it from these others. We could take my MSCs and we could turn them into osteocytes or chondrocytes. Chondrocytes are great if you've got cartilage loss. But if I took them from this donor tissue and tried to make chondrocytes, we wouldn't be able to use them. My immune system would reject them because they would have the donor's HLA marker. So that's why we can't do that. That's why you run into those sort of issues. So by putting these MSCs that aren't from me into my body, I'm going to get 8 months to a year of them going in there doing their thing. So the telomere length, even if it shortens, it doesn't matter because I'm not putting these in my body trying to keep them forever. I'm trying and hoping that within 3 to 6 months, I'm going to see peak results because that's what we typically see. You got bad knees, usually around 3 to 6 months, they're back to perfect with a stem cell injection. You've got fibromyalgia, well, we do an IV, usually 3 to 6 months. It's reprogrammed your immune system and everything's working properly. So we don't need them to last long term. In fact, they can't, so who cares if their telomeres are only going to be good for the next 40 years instead of the next 80. So when people make this argument that, oh, these cells, because they're cultured, aren't as good, aren't as great, all of that, it's not it. Now, the stem cells work by sending out what are called extracellular vesicles. People now are calling them exosomes, but it's the same thing. Each passage, you do find that the cells, they release fewer exosomes, but it is such a minuscule difference, we can barely measure it. So it's not like what people are trying to claim, oh, these cells are cultured and now they're going to be so much weaker. It is minuscule difference. An MSC is an MSC is an MSC. That's what Dr. Kaplan used to always say at his conferences, and it's the truth. There's some minimal differences depending on what tissue you take them from, but we haven't even defined that yet. The biologists haven't, they're working on it, but nothing significantly different that could make one better than the other at this point. So that's the difference. Look, stem cells work. That's what we're finding. We've been doing this for 8 years. There's other clinics that have done it longer. There's studies going back to the early 1990s. If you go to Google Scholar, I think there's over 100,000 studies on MSCs. If you go to PubMed, there's over 30,000. It's been well researched. It's worked incredibly well. We treat so many patients and we're having incredible outcomes. So, go with where you feel comfortable. There's a lot of great places out there. We're more of a boutique clinic. We treat around 150 patients a month right now, and that's where we're trying to stay. Because one of my big complaints in the United States is you go see your doctor, you get 5 minutes, they're passing you off to their PA, whatever else. We don't want to be that. We want to make sure that we can really cater to the patients that come here, give them the best care possible, and try and give them the best results possible. So that's what we do at Dream Body Clinic. If you want to learn more, you can get a hold of us anytime. Just go to www.dreambody.clinic or call us toll free at 833-445-9089. I'm Josh, happy to help.